Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. You were curious about the latest and greatest in baseball, and right now everyone's talking about a few certain New York Yankees players and, those ridiculous home runs they were hitting at the end of March.
Yeah, it's been impossible to ignore those numbers.
Right, like, is this new torpedo bat the secret sauce behind this offensive explosion?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
For sure. And to get to the bottom of it, we've got a great resource to help us out. Physicist Alan Nathan over at Fangraphs has done a really deep analysis on the physics of this bat design.
That's a great place to start because Alan Nathan is really an expert when it comes to understanding the science of baseball.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. What is it about this torpedo bat that makes it so special, so different?
Well, the idea is actually pretty simple. You know how in a regular bat, the end of the bat doesn't really do much? You don't want to hit the ball there?
Right. You want to hit it on the sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. So the torpedo bat takes some of the weight from that less effective end of the bat and moves it closer to the sweet spot where you want to make contact.
Okay, so put the weight where it matters most makes sense. But what are we hoping to achieve by moving that mass?
Well, Alan Nathan points out a couple of potential benefits. One is that by reducing the weight at the very end of the bat, you can lower what's called the moment of inertia. You can think of that as like the resistance to swinging the bat, how much effort it takes to get it moving.
Right.
So a lower moment of inertia, or MOI, could mean a faster swing.
Mm.
It's easier to get the bat up to speed.
So that could give the batter, more time to react to the pitch and really put some power behind the swing.
Exactly. And then the other thing they might be able to do is actually make the sweet spot itself a little bit bigger.
How does that work?
Well, if you're moving some of that weight, you might be able to make the diameter of the sweet spot a bit wider without throwing off the balance of the bat.
So bigger sweet spot, more room for error.
I like it. All right, you don't have to hit it perfectly to still get a good, solid result.
That's great for any hitter. So as we dive into Alan Nathan's analysis, what we're really trying to find out is this bat some kind of, miracle offensive weapon that's going to change the game?
Or is it, more hype than substance? Is there really something to it, or are we just getting caught up in the excitement?
Right, we're going to use the physics, the actual science to see if it backs up what we're seeing on the field.
I think it's really important to be able to separate the hype from the reality and really understand what's happening.
I couldn't agree more. This whole idea of taking a deep dive into this, the science and the observations behind baseball, it really reminds me of the kind of stuff that our friends over at Planet of Baseball do.
Oh, yeah. They always have really great insights and analysis.
So a big shout out to all the listeners of the Planet of Baseball podcast. You can find all their awesome content on their blog at planetofbaseball.com, and make sure you follow them on Twitter at planetofbaseball.
They really highlight that, that passion and the dedication to understanding the game at a deeper level that a lot of fans have.
For sure. And of course, we have to give a huge thanks to Alan Nathan, who you can find on X, formerly Twitter, as @PubGuy.
Yeah, his work is the foundation of this entire deep dive.
Exactly. His post on Fangraphs is fantastic. Highly recommend it. So let's dig into Alan Nathan's analysis. What are the key findings here?
Well, the initial assumption was that the torpedo bat would, either allow for a quicker swing because of the lower moment of inertia, or that it would give you a larger sweet spot. But his simulations actually showed something a little bit surprising.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What did he find?
So he simulated a standard bat and a torpedo bat. Both bats were about the same length, about 33.5 inches, and they were really close in weight, too, between 31.5 and 32.1 ounces.
Got it. So pretty much standard specs.
Yeah, and what he found was that the moment of inertia was almost identical between the two bats.
Really? So the whole idea that this bat is going to magically make your swing faster might not be the biggest advantage.
Yeah, it seems like any difference in swing speed would be really small.
Yeah.
Probably not noticeable in a real game situation.
Okay, so that's interesting. So where did he focus his analysis after that?
Well, he looked at a couple other things. He looked at the maximum exit velocity of the ball when it's hit and the size of the bat's sweet spot. Those are the key things that you're looking for.
Right. So what did he find?
So when he looked at the maximum exit velocity, it was also really similar between the two bats. So it doesn't seem like the torpedo bat gives you a significant boost in power when you hit the ball perfectly.
Okay. So maybe not a huge power boost right off the bat.
Right. But then he looked at the sweet spot, and this is where the torpedo bat really seems to shine.
Oh, so.
His simulations show that the torpedo bat actually does widen the sweet spot, meaning you can hit the ball a little off-center and still get good results.
So basically, even if you don't hit it perfectly, you're still more likely to get a good solid hit off the bat.
Yeah, exactly. And he also found that the torpedo bat performed better on hits that were closer to the handle of the bat, which is really interesting.
So those kind of inside hits that you don't always get perfect contact on.
Yeah, and while it performed slightly worse on hits towards the very end of the barrel, beyond the sweet spot, those gains on the inside hits seem to outweigh any losses on the extreme end.
Okay. I mean, think about it. How often do you really hit it on the very end of the bat?
Yeah, you're right. Most of the time it's going to be a little closer to your hands anyway.
Exactly. So it seems like those hits that are a little bit off, with the torpedo bat, they might actually turn into solid line drives instead of weak grounders or pop-ups.
And another interesting thing he found is that the point of peak collision efficiency shifted a little bit towards the handle with the torpedo bat.
What does collision efficiency mean again?
Well, it's basically a measure of how well the bat transfers the energy from the pitch into the speed of the ball coming off the bat.
Got it. So basically, it's about how effectively the bat uses the energy of the pitch.
Right. And the shift towards the handle suggests that the torpedo bat might be more efficient at transferring that energy when the contact is a little bit closer in.
Okay, so it sounds like the main benefit of the torpedo bat, based on these simulations, isn't necessarily about hitting the ball with the absolute most force, but rather making it easier to get good results on a wider range of contact points.
I think that's a really good way to put it. It's more about consistency and maybe turning some weaker hits into better hits.
And it's interesting how, the headlines were all about those huge home runs, but the physics seem to suggest a more subtle advantage.
Right. It's not just about hitting those monster dingers every time, but getting more consistent, solid contact overall.
Right. It's like a more balanced approach, which I think a lot of teams would really value.
Yeah, exactly. Being able to consistently get those hard hit balls in play can really put pressure on the defense.
For sure. Now, Nathan didn't just stop at the simulations, right? He actually wants to do some real-world experiments, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He emphasizes that experimental validation is really important.
So what kind of experiments are they planning?
Well, they're going to be doing some lab measurements to see how the bats vibrate when they hit the ball and how they perform in high-speed collisions.
Yeah.
Really controlled testing.
Interesting. What are they hoping to learn from those lab tests?
They'll be able to look at things like, the coefficient of restitution, which tells you how bouncy the bat is, basically how much energy is lost when the ball hits it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and they can measure the collision efficiency at different points on the bat, which will give them even more data to compare the two types of bats.
That's awesome. And then, of course, we have the real-world data from actual MLB games, right?
Exactly. With StatCast, we have so much information about every single hit, exit velocity, launch angle, all that stuff.
So we can see how these bats are actually performing in game situations.
Right, and we can compare that data to Alan Nathan's simulations and see if it matches up.
It's like the perfect marriage of theoretical physics and the real world.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how these two things can work together.
So just to sum up Alan Nathan's findings, it looks like the torpedo bat doesn't seem to increase maximum exit velocity, and the moment of inertia is pretty similar to a traditional bat, so we're not expecting huge changes in swing speed. But the simulations do show that it improves performance on those hits closer to the hands, and it does seem to create a larger sweet spot, which is a huge advantage for hitters.
Yeah, that's a great summary, and it's important to remember that these are just simulations. The lab testing and the real MLB data will give us even more insight into how these bats actually perform.
Absolutely. And I think it's really cool how this whole discussion shows us how, equipment and strategy are always evolving in baseball.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've seen so many different innovations over the years, new bat designs, new training methods. Teams are always looking for that edge.
Right. And it makes you wonder about, those past attempts to manipulate bat design. You mentioned cupped bats and corked bats, even the way aluminum bats are designed.
That's a great point. What makes a torpedo bat different? Why is it potentially more impactful?
Yeah. Is it just a more refined approach to mass distribution, or is there something else going on?
Maybe it's the materials that they're using or the specific shape of the bat. Or maybe it's just that, now we have the technology to really understand the physics behind it and optimize the design.
Or maybe it's a combination of all those things.
I think that's probably the most likely scenario. It's a culmination of years of research and development.
Well, I think this has been a really insightful deep dive into the science behind the torpedo bat, and it really makes you appreciate the complexity of the game.
Yeah, we often think about baseball as just hitting and pitching and catching, but there's so much more to it.
Exactly. There's the physics, there's the strategy, there's the human element. It's all intertwined.
And I think that's what makes it such a fascinating sport to follow.
Well said, and a huge thanks again to Alan Nathan for his fantastic work. If you're interested in learning more about the physics of baseball, definitely check out his articles on Fangraphs.
Yeah, his work is always insightful and thought-provoking.
So keep exploring, everyone, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
Until next time.